Hello, everyone. I'm Ed Densel, and I host Unfound, and I run this YouTube channel. I realize you don't want to give a thumbs up to the following video until you watch it. You know what? That's totally understandable. I can appreciate that. But what you can do right now is subscribe to this channel. The button is right there. Thanks. Hello, everyone, and welcome again to Unfound Now, the monthly series that started way back in June of 2020, where I get a chance to analyze recent disappearances, something we do not do on the regular podcast that comes out every Friday. For this particular Unfound Now, we'll be looking at the disappearance of Lorenzo Holmes Jr. from Juneau, Alaska on August 8th, 2022. Very unique circumstances, but I think it's going to allow us to educate ourselves on a disappearance. And of course, we hope that Lorenzo is found, and I'll be getting into the details in just a little bit. If you are new to Unfound Now, there are three main reasons that I started this series. I think we're on, episode 29 now, 28, 29, 30, somewhere in there. There are three main reasons that I started it. Number one is publicity. Any disappearance, whether it's 60 years old or 6 days old, can use some publicity. And certainly on this YouTube channel that has 15,000 subscribers, about that, it can certainly help. Number two is education. Nobody should be surprised who has been listening to Unfound for any length of time. Anybody who has done that knows that I'm all about the education. I love going to schools, speaking to criminal justice majors, and using these recent disappearances as lessons, I think can be helpful to everybody. Looking at them, and it's a good way to teach people about disappearances, and I think that's how these disappearances will get solved. When the public gets more educated on them. Once again, whether it's a disappearance that's just a few days old or many, many years old. And then the third reason is instant analysis. I thought you might like to get inside my mind, some of my assistants' minds, see what's going on up there when we read about a disappearance for the first time or find out about one, just like any of you do. And I think what you'll find is maybe in some ways we do exactly what you do, but maybe we have a lot more experience. And I think getting into that, seeing how we analyze recent disappearances, kind of reading between the lines, can certainly, I think, help all of you as you become more educated on disappearances. So what are the three themes for this episode? You know, if you're not new to Unfound Now, you know how I love themes, and I have three themes for every episode that has been done. Started that right well back in June of 2020. Here are the three themes for this episode and how they relate to Lorenzo's disappearance. And after the map section, I'll be going into these much more deeply. Number one, water science isn't settled. Number two, overrated video. And number three, no walking needed. Okay, now I'm going to go to the map. We're going to go to Juneau, Alaska. I've never been there. But you must understand that Lorenzo disappeared from a cruise ship. This is a first for Unfound Now. And in fact, I don't think that we've covered a disappearance like that on the podcast either, even though we've covered 270 disappearances now. So we're going to go to the map, and I will be back on screen in a few minutes. Okay, let's take a look at the map. You can see that red dot right there in the middle on the screen. That is the Gastineau Channel, and I will be zooming in on that point in a moment, and I will be reading one article and then a piece of a Wikipedia article regarding this disappearance. In fact, it's part of the Wikipedia part is actually on the page for the cruise ship where this happened. So I just wanted to show you where this occurred, just to zoom this out a little bit. There it is, the Gastineau Channel right there. You can see it's not right on the Pacific Ocean or the Gulf of Alaska. It's a little bit inland, and what happens is that these cruise ships, and I think this was technically a cruise from Vancouver, Canada. They go up here and then they go into the interior here. And it's beautiful. I'm not much of a cold weather person, and I love cruises, but cruising to me means going to the Caribbean. But this is very popular, very, very popular, I think, and I'm guessing some of you have gone on cruises to Alaska like this. So now I'm going to zoom in to this place called the Gastineau Channel, and you're going to see how small and narrow this little section of water really is. I mean, compared, you can see these other areas, huge water areas, but where this channel is very, very narrow. And I'm going to guess, given the way it looks, that this is probably man-made. Probably. So I'm going to read an article, and this, I think, looking at the map while I read this, will help all of you. 31-year-old Lorenzo Holmes Jr. is an entertainer from Tennessee. So he worked on the ship as maybe a musician, dancer, something like that. He worked on a cruise ship, the Conningsdam, since May 2020. So he'd only been on this ship for 3 or 4 months. But on August 8th, 2022, around 11:52 p.m., so at night, witnesses reported hearing screams from a person in the Gastineau Channel. The passengers from a nearby cruise ship reported seeing something fall from the Conningsdam cruise ship and then call out for help, the Juneau Empire reports. CCTV verified a person climbed the ship's railing and never returned. So there's no doubt that Lorenzo went into the water by choice. Now, it doesn't mean he was in the right frame of mind. Maybe he thought he was jumping into a swimming pool. We just don't know. But there's no allegations that he was being chased or there was a fight or he was thrown in, nothing like that. But this is the exact location now that you see where that little red dot is. The ship was located across from the 430 block of Egan Drive. This is Egan Drive right here. And that's the 430 block right where the red dot is in the Gastineau Channel. The Conningsdam identified the person who went overboard as Lorenzo Holmes. United States Coast Guard was immediately alerted and searched the water and shorelines, but Lorenzo has never been located. Lorenzo Anthony Holmes is 6'2", weighs 176 pounds when he vanished. If you have any information, please contact the Alaska State Troopers at 907-269-5511. So the way I understand this is that the ship was not docked. It was, so when they say across, that would mean to me that it was like out in this area. I don't know if it was going would that be northwest or southeast, but it was somewhere out in here. As it says, CCTV, closed circuit television, verified a person jumped the ship's railing and never returned. Now, what's a little confusing maybe is that why would he jump and then when he hits the water and seemingly survives, was he screaming? Did he not realize what he was doing? My impression is that when people choose to jump from bridges or ships, if they jump and they survive hitting the water, they don't scream because they wanted to be there in the first place. But maybe he had reservations. Maybe as he was going from the railing down to the water, he thought, hey, maybe I shouldn't be doing this. Certainly possible. But given this location, I think that we must be open to the idea maybe he did survive and swam to shore and is alive out there somewhere almost 3 months later, didn't want to be on a cruise ship anymore, wanted to get away, start a new life. I guess we have to be open to this. I mean, it's much more likely that this could have happened to Lorenzo than, for example, anybody who jumps off the Golden Gate Bridge. Because you can see, it's not that wide. In fact, the channel right here at this, like where seemingly this bridge is, this bridge, it's only like 1,000 feet. That's less than a quarter mile. Now, if Lorenzo didn't know how to swim, then I guess it wouldn't matter. But if he did and had some reservations and had second thoughts before he hit the water, and then when he hit the water, he's screaming for help. If you know how to swim, I guess there might be a chance that he did swim to shore and took off. Certainly possible. Maybe that would explain why the Coast Guard did not find him. Maybe. But if that's not the situation, he didn't try to swim to shore, then as you will hear when I get to the first point about water signs not being settled, it's a little, is it hard to understand, or isn't it hard to understand? Is it hard to understand, or isn't it hard to understand why Lorenzo hasn't been found in this very, very small area? And just to zoom out for you again to show you how long this is. The channel, looking at the legend there, looks to be about 8 miles long, maybe longer than that, maybe 10 miles long. And then we zoom in here, and kind of in this area right here, it looks like it might be maybe 2,500 feet wide, so about, half a mile, I guess that would be. But then in this very narrow spot, it's only like 1,000 feet. It's really not that far. Allow me to now read part of the Wikipedia page. This has to do with the ship. It's on the ship's page, but they did include it. 2022 incident. On August 8th, 2022, while the Connings Dam was at port in Juneau. So it says, this article says, it was at a port. So the ship was stopped. It wasn't moving. It was anchored or tied to the shore somewhere here. It's just a little different than the other article. Was at port in Juneau, Alaska, in the Gastineau Channel. A crew member from Tennessee, Lorenzo Anthony Holmes, went overboard. A search and rescue operation was begun, coordinated by the U.S. Coast Guard, and involving Conning Dam's sister ship MS Eurodam. Holmes has not been found and remains a missing person with the Juneau Police Department. So, was the ship docked? Wasn't it docked? Two stories seem to contradict each other. When I hear was across from Egan, and maybe we will go to the regular satellite view for a moment to see if it is possible. It just doesn't look to me like, there's any, when it says across from Egan Drive, does this mean over here? Does it mean over here more to the east? You can see where it says Juneau Cruise Ship Terminal Area. I guess that's where cruise ships would come and dock. In fact, maybe you can even see one right there. But then why didn't it just say the ship was docked at the Juneau Cruise Ship Terminal Area? Why did it say that the ship was across from the 430 block of Egan Drive? Hard to understand. I don't know. But as I also stated, though, this seems to be, I was looking up the Connings Dam's usual itinerary, and I think this is part of a 12-day cruise, and they might have been 7 or 8 days into it when this happened. This wasn't like the ship was just pulling out on the first hour and then he jumped. Seems like this happened some days into this cruise. This was more than a week cruise, like a 10 or 11, 12-day cruise. I think starting in Vancouver, I think. But that's where he went missing, right in that area, right there. A lot of boats, a lot of ships, a lot of people. And still, Lorenzo hasn't been found yet. I'm inclined to believe that, unfortunately, he did die in the water, given the circumstances. But maybe this was part of some plan of his. But, if he did die in the water, why hasn't he been found? Good question. So that's the map analysis of where Lorenzo Holmes Jr. went missing. And now I will go deeper into those 3 educational points for this particular episode. Okay, and I'm back. Before I get into those 3 educational points for this particular Unfound Now, Just want to remind you to, if you're new to Unfound, whether the podcast Unfound Now or this total YouTube channel, maybe you'll think about subscribing by hitting the little red button down there in the bottom right-hand corner. I would appreciate it. Would appreciate it if you could give this video a thumbs up, like it, and share it. Send it to anybody that you think would be interested in this topic. Of course, share the entire channel if you could. And then maybe if you want to go one step further, maybe think about hitting the join button right down below my head here. And for the low price of 10 cents a day, you get some additional cool stuff that the average person doesn't. So you can hit the join button, check out what those items are, and I think you'll enjoy it. I think it's a pretty good deal. So let's now move to those three educational points to remind you what they are again. Water science isn't settled. I think you now can see why that's a topic, having already just done the map section. Number 2, overrated video. And number 3, no walking needed. Number 1, water science isn't settled. I have a list of here, and I'm looking, I don't do this off the top of my head. I'm looking off to my left, looking at my notes. But after 270 disappearances, probably realize we've covered quite a few where people have gone missing near water, and there are reasons to believe that these people went into the water. And just to give you an idea of the variety of different kinds of water, different types of water types, I guess you might, forms of water, bodies of water, maybe those are the words I'm looking for. That's the word I'm looking for. We've covered a variety of them. So allow me to go through them, and I'll get a little deeper into this. First of all, we've covered quite a few disappearances that occurred near rivers, and of course, thinking a lot of times is the missing people went into the rivers. Rivers. Holly White from New Mexico. Shane Fell from Louisiana. Jake Lachelet from Mississippi. I've covered many. Long list. Ben Archer from Delaware. The problem, of course, is that we can't be sure if these people went into the water or not because there's no video, there are no reliable witnesses. But as many of this type that we've covered, surely some of them went into those rivers. Surely. Maybe not all of them. Maybe some of these scenes were staged. Cars were put near the river to try to make it look like these people went into the river when they really didn't. That's certainly possible. But surely, as many as we've covered, surely some of these people went into those rivers. Also covered disappearance regarding a lake. The Pickering Six. 6 Canadian young men who seemingly went out on a boat and never came back. A couple from the Gulf of Mexico. Just right here, the Gulf of Mexico is right back there behind me. The Marco Island 3, that was an episode from very early on in Unfound's existence where 4 young men went out scuba diving and only 1 came back. Tiffany Daniels, her car was found on the edge of the Gulf of Mexico up in the panhandle of Florida. She is still missing all these years later. We've covered some disappearances regarding oceans. Flight 370, an idea is that went into the Indian Ocean, although it still hasn't been found. We might also think about J.R. Mullihan, who was from Virginia, but his car was eventually found on the beach in North Carolina, so the Atlantic Ocean. So when it comes to Lorenzo, and you look at all of those, and I think maybe just theoretically you can maybe start thinking, there's a lot of this people might be hard to find. And what I'm saying here is that even though currents are understood, you can see all sorts of maps of currents of the world, how the water flows at any particular time, and which way the wind was blowing, and how fast, not just the direction of the current, but the speed of it. You think about the rivers. We know where the cars were, if we're to believe these people did go into the rivers. And we know what the height of the river was at the time. We know how fast it was moving. Was it low? Was it high? And still, despite all of this science, and there are people who devote their lives to understanding water and how it flows all over the world, people still go missing in it. So the science is not settled. Maybe a perfect example is in the Marco Island 3. Of course, there is the belief there that the guy who survived, Jeff Wandich, was not telling the truth. But if we're to take him at his word, we know exactly where these 3 other men went missing. We know what the current was. We know how fast it was, what direction it was going. They were discovered to be missing pretty quickly given the circumstances. Those 3 young men were still not found. How can that be? And maybe we want to look at a disappearance like Holly White's, which was very recent on Unfound, where her car was found near a bridge in New Mexico. The water under this bridge, the river under this bridge, not the Mississippi, not a fast-flowing river, but still remains not found. Even though other people who jumped from that bridge, their remains were found. Tough to understand. So when we think about Lorenzo's, he didn't disappear in a body of water that was anywhere near as complex as a river, a lake, a gulf, or an ocean. He disappeared in a channel where there are a lot of people, doesn't have a very fast current, not a lot of waves or anything. In fact, that's the reason it exists. The reason they create these channels is because it's easier for these boats, these big, huge ships, to dock. And still, he is missing. So for all of you, when you hear about a disappearance that might have occurred on a body of water, you shouldn't automatically think, oh, well, we know everything about water there is to know. Surely that person is going to be found. Not so. And maybe we can even think about what's happening at Lake Mead out of my favorite city in the world, Las Vegas. Outside of Las Vegas, Lake Mead is near there. With the level as it continues to drop, a lot of people have gone missing on that lake, and now some of them are being found on the bottom of the lake, where we think, well, people's bodies automatically float eventually. Finding out that's not the situation. That wasn't the situation with these people who are now being found. Their remains are being found as the lake drops. Some of them may be foul play, but some of them aren't. So we have to think about that. Water science isn't settled. So anytime you hear about a disappearance that could involve the body of water, it's probably more complex than you think. We're certainly running into that with Lorenzo's disappearance. So number 2, overrated video. This has kind of been a theme, not planned, over the course of this year of Unfound, that I've covered quite a few disappearances, maybe most recently Kyle Fleischman. We have a bunch of video, person walking this direction, person walking that direction, and still that person is missing with Kyle, 15 years later, 16 years later? And you wonder, how can that be? And I've come to the conclusion that if the video doesn't absolutely 100% show what exactly happened, for example, somebody who really did jump off a bridge or jumped off a ship or is walking down the street and got attacked by someone like we had very recently in Memphis, Tennessee, when that jogger, Eliza Fletcher, got abducted and murdered. There were video of that happening. If the video cannot show that exact moment, it's probably useless. If a video just shows somebody walking by, going in a particular direction, what we've learned is as soon as that person goes off camera, anything is possible. So, and I have some more examples. Brian Schaefer, maybe one of the best-known disappearances regarding video. Rashawn Francis from Pennsylvania. Brandy Wells from Texas. Kimberly Wilson Talley from Ohio/Pennsylvania, seemingly caught in the passenger seat of her car with a bag over her head. And I urge you, if that sounds strange to you, you should find that episode and listen to it. But videos probably has not been helpful in any of them because those are all still unsolved disappearances. But much like water science, as I just talked about, the public, maybe a lot of you just think, well, if we got video, that's all you need. It's not. Video, as this number 2 point states, video is very, very overrated. Now, what's kind of different here, though, in Lorenzo's disappearances, there seemingly was video. A video did show him going into the water, and he didn't get pushed in there or didn't slip or anything. It seems he climbed over to the railing all by himself. So, in a way, I guess the video helps. At least I guess we know it's not foul play. At least we know that it's not an accident. I don't know how much that helps his family. It's all very sad. But what's clear is that even though we have the actual video of him going into the water, that has not been helpful in finding him at all. You know the exact spot where he went into the water, the exact time. We know that if he hit face first or feet first or kind of did a belly flop or something, we know all of that. And still it's not been helpful in trying to find Lorenzo. So when you hear about disappearances and they say, well, yeah, there's video of the missing person, if the video really, really doesn't show the precise moment, probably not going to be helpful. And even when it seems this situation with Lorenzo, that we have this video, I'm not sure that of course it hasn't helped. He's still missing. But even if the video didn't exist, it does seem that there were a lot of witnesses anyway. So maybe we didn't even need the video. Those witnesses might have said, oh no, he was there all by himself. There was nobody who pushed him in. There wasn't a fight, or he wasn't running away from anybody. So we had witnesses anyway in this situation. So number 2, video is overrated. Very, very overrated. Keep that in mind. There's many disappearances that have all sorts of video, still unsolved. Whereas there are a lot of disappearances that have no video that do get solved. So number 3, no walking required. Most of you know that I speak to criminal justice majors, and I've done a couple this fall. Maybe a third one's going to happen here in Ohio. I'm not sure if it's going to happen or not now. But, I love teaching people. This is why I do Unfound now. I love teaching people about disappearances, especially teaching people who eventually will be responsible for disappearances, investigating them, taking those reports. So I'm speaking to criminal justice majors. And during those presentations, I break disappearances down into different types. So some of those are the man said, it's a murder but, drugs play a role. And then another one that I talk of, there's a league of their own, ones that are just so unique. And then there's one called the walk-off, where it seems like a person really did walk off, just decided to leave. Now, of course, it depends on who says the person walked off and the circumstance. A lot of things can go into that. But still, the title of this type, the walk-off, is very accurate. But there's something you need to understand. It doesn't necessarily mean the person actually walked. So for Lorenzo's, his is a version of a walk-off. Even though, yes, he walked over to the railing, but really, it's technically a jump-off. Not a walk-off, it's a jump-off because he went into the water willingly. So whenever you hear me talk about a walk-off type of disappearance, what you have to understand is that could mean a lot of different things. It could mean the person jumped. It could mean the person ran or walked or drove off. Person got in a car, drove off, and then the car is found abandoned somewhere, and there's no reason to believe that it was staged there. For all sorts of, drive off, they jump off, walk off, run off, drive off for all sorts of reasons, but that all falls under the umbrella of the generic term of the walk-off. It doesn't necessarily mean, though, somebody actually had to walk. We also have to realize, I don't know a lot about Lorenzo Holmes Jr. I haven't seen a lot of comments from his family. He seemingly did this all on his own. Was he having some sort of psychological issues? I don't know. It seems. But what also goes in this section of no walking required is that in any article that you read, when somebody says, well, my daughter, my son, my friend who would never do that, you should probably be doubtful about that. If there's one thing that I've learned over the last 6 years about people and covering disappearances, that many times you just don't know what's going on inside them. The way they're acting, the way they look is not indicative of what is going on inside. Mentally, emotionally, psychologically, it's just, you just can't, just don't know. And the best psychiatrist might not even get to the bottom of it as well. So you should never necessarily discount anything. And, I have in my notes over here to the left, maybe some of you are very familiar with the disappearance of Amy Lynn Bradley. She is a woman who was on a cruise ship, and she went missing years and years ago. And I know this disappearance fairly well, and from day one I've always thought, just doesn't sound like there. It's certainly possible that she could have been pushed off the ship. There are no facts to support that. There's no facts to deny that. But here's something I really don't think. I don't think the ship got to the port and she walked off with some other people and then got put into sex slavery, as some people believe. There's a lot of stories out there. I don't believe that. And I know what people say, well, she wouldn't have done that. She wouldn't have. Who did she get hooked up with? It would have pushed her off into the ocean. She surely wouldn't have jumped. You just can't rule these things out. And knowing Amy Lynn Bradley's disappearance the way I do, it does sound to me a lot like Lorenzo's. And it seems like maybe not once a month, once every couple months, you do hear about people going into the water off cruise ships. Now, maybe not in a channel exactly like this situation, but in the Caribbean, wherever cruise ships are, people going through tough times, maybe they went on a cruise ship for just that expressed reason, to jump off, to never be seen again. We just don't know what's going on with people internally. And I've not seen anything to contradict this, but I'm guessing all the people who knew Lorenzo, maybe at least some of them are very stunned that this went on. And if we didn't have witnesses, we didn't have that video, I'm sure many of them would thinking, oh, the only way that Lorenzo could go into the water is if somebody pushed him. There was some fight. He was trying to get away with from someone. And that did not happen. But this is all under the umbrella of the walk-off. People acting in ways that their friends and family could never predict, but it happens. It just does. And nobody is more surprised about this than I am. I could have never guessed this 6 years ago when I started Unfound. So I always finish every Unfound now with some analysis, and there's really not a ton of analysis due. It's really certainly not a mystery as to what happened to Lorenzo. The big question, though, is he went missing in this channel. It doesn't have the flow of the Mississippi River. Everybody knows where he went in, when he went in. There's no question that he went into the water, unlike some of the disappearances we've covered where we're not sure if the person went into the water or not. Big question is, why hasn't he been found? It's a tough question, and that's why one of the points was water science isn't settled. And I am certainly not a water expert by any means. All I know is people go missing in water, and nobody can seem to explain why. Maybe if his remains are not found, I have to believe that he's deceased. Very sad. And maybe we'll eventually, if this disappearance goes for 6 months, maybe one of his family members or friends will come forward and say, yeah, he was going through a tough time. Maybe we'll find out about all these things. At the time of doing this episode, though, on October 29th, 2022, there's just nothing out there like this. All I can think is Lorenzo was going through something and he just didn't want to be here anymore. Or if he was delusional, maybe he was on something, didn't realize he was doing what he did. Very sad. So that's this episode of Unfound Now. And please, once again, subscribe, like, share. Maybe you want to join. And I will see you next month. Thanks for watching.